think I'm gonna have to start a rambling playlist as well, just because political stuff just happens, and like it or not, you can't actually separate politics and tech, because they're both related to humanity. The clues in the name with political, with the root word meaning of the polis, the body politic, people. And in tech we've got a responsibility to acknowledge politics, acknowledge how the technology that we create can affect politics. And it's very difficult when you have a tech workplace like Basecamp that's just said, we're going to ban political discussions. Now, Basecamp in particular is like Slack. It's designed to facilitate workplace chat effectively, doing what IRC did in the past. Basecamp also is effectively a project management suite for software. So you've got this kind of weird intersection of things where you've got, on the one hand, you've got workplace conversations, it's replacing the water cooler, and on the other hand, you're having actual project conversations on there that are related to work. Years ago, when I used to work at an oil service company, those conversations were separate. You didn't have political private conversations in email, and you also were free to basically go to the water cooler or go to the smoking shed, and that be where you do your politics. And this is the trouble with nowadays with tech. Companies can have workplace conversations in one chat area, and then on the same instance have work conversations, and you've got that very tricky middle area where all of those communications that you're having on your workplace chat do actually belong to work. So on the one hand, I can see why the leaders of Basecamp have decided to say no political conversations on there at all. And on the other hand, it's kind of a human rights issue. Although I'd advise anyone who's working for a corporate workplace, is it really appropriate to be having those conversations on there? I mean, it's kind of a surveillance environment for you, whether you like it or not. On the other hand, the very statement kind of indicates people are trying to ignore the political ramifications, because it is often used as a tactic by people who don't want to discuss political points of view, difficult situations. Those conversations may make them feel ashamed because of their own personal politics. So it's a lot easier to step back, de-escalate a situation, go, oh, I don't really want to talk about politics. But that's just bullshit. Like it or not, politics are part of humanity. And often people who don't really want to talk about politics benefit from the status quo of those politics. And what do I mean by status quo? Well, that's quite simple. Look at, for example, the very men who are the leaders of Basecamp, both very privileged white men. So yeah, people not wanting to discuss politics in a work environment or in general, it's trying to skirt the issues, because they can just skirt the issues. Most of the time, they're not going to come up against the hard edges of what our laws are. They're not going to come against the hard edges of prejudice or outside of society in any way. So when these political conversations happen, they're feeling uncomfortable. And you know, we should all feel uncomfortable about it, because when people are protesting about politics and about those hard edges that actually hurt people, that kill people, that make their life just that much worse, it's something we should be discussing, because politics is about humanity at its very core. You ignore politics at your peril. People who choose not to vote, I mean, that is a choice, but you've got to be aware of the consequences when you do that. You put democracy in that much more danger. We see this in France, for example, when you've got the first round where it's all like a spectrum of political parties, and then it comes down to the final two, and the last time it was Marine Le Pen against Emmanuel Macron, and people felt they had to vote. They saw that responsibility. People who wouldn't normally vote did. And in the UK, we've suffered from people who say they aren't interested in politics, they aren't interested in the detail. And now with Brexit, we're seeing the outcomes of that political decision that was made in 2016, of that referendum. And we see the continual political ramifications and societal ramifications with the Conservative government in the UK. And we're seeing the kind of similar but different kind of political situation in the US. I mean, it's not great, but imagine how much worse it would be if Trump was still in power. So your political decisions do matter. Where you vote matters, and you need to be having those conversations. You don't necessarily have to phrase it as red versus blue, Conservative versus Labour, but you have to think about it in terms of political issues, because at the end of the day, that's what people care about. This is the sharp end of politics that folk worry about. And I mean, some of these political conversations happen with people who work at GitHub, for example, because of the ICE contracts. And, you know, at times it's really difficult to have conversations about other types of politics, like the free software movement, for example. On the one hand, you've got the whole egalitarian views of free software, and of course it should be free. And then on the other hand, you've got the very crappy culture that, you know, isn't just in Floss, it's all over tech. And you know what? It's not just tech, it's everywhere. It's in the workplace. And it comes down to people who are used to the status quo, have benefited from the status quo. You know, they don't want anything to change. They don't want to make their lives a bit harder. And, you know, then there's everybody else that comes up against these walls, against these barriers, and they have to work just a little, they have to work that much harder. So when you're trying to shut down political discourse, you're kind of ignoring everybody else because you don't want to feel uncomfortable about it. And, you know, you need the discomfort. You really do.